Hi, everybody. It's Julia, your trusted travel expert, helping you find that je ne sais quoi wherever you are in the world. And this week, I wanted to help you out by giving you one of my suggested itineraries. As I've mentioned before, I worked for the first 4 or so years of my career planning road trips around the US and Canada, but mostly around the Southwest for Europeans coming to the US. So I am intimately familiar with all of the ins and outs. And so I wanted to start off with the most popular, and that's the sort of Grand Canyon loop. And you can either do this round trip from Vegas, you can do Phoenix to Vegas. It really depends on how much time you have, where your interests lie, and how many of the national parks you really want to get in to see. And so you can do this as short as a week. Or you could do this as long as 2 weeks. Again, they're sort of options. So I'm going to start with Vegas because that just seems to be the more logical or the more popular starting point. Now, if you hate Vegas, I totally understand. If you never ever want to go to Vegas, I totally understand. It is a a place to see. It is not unlike anywhere else in the world that I've seen, at least. But you don't have to spend a lot of time there. You can fly in and immediately hit the road. You can fly in and just spend one night. It really is, again, up to you and your interests. But what you would want to see, and I kind of start going south out of Vegas. What the first thing you definitely would want to take time to see is the Hoover Dam. And you can take a tour of the Hoover Dam. You can just drive by it. But it is pretty special. And if you are sort of in your 40s or 50s, you may have very fond memories of the certain Superman movie where the Hoover Dam breaks or whatever. I have memories of that. And so seeing Hoover Dam, driving, you used to be able to drive over it. Now they built this really big, impressive bridge that you drive over that and sort of look down on the Hoover Dam. But you can take a tour, and that's definitely worth a stop, I think. And then when you continue south, you hit the famous Route 66. And there are a couple of little stops on Route 66 that you can either stop and see. You could spend a night, especially if you just wanted to fly into Vegas and get out of Vegas. And that is Kingman and Seligman. And those are two towns that are along Route 66, kind of in the middle of nowhere, Arizona, that, you can find some of the kitschy Route 66 stuff there. But what our main goal is to get to the Grand Canyon, right? And I think it's about a 4-hour drive from Vegas to the Grand Canyon. So you could, of course, do that in one day. Hopefully not the day you fly into Vegas, just because that's a long day. But there are lots of different places that you want to stop, that you could stop and stay for a night or two in the Grand Canyon. And I would recommend 2 nights because, again, depending on how much you want to get into it, I mean, it's a really impressive site and there's a lot to see and do. And so I think it does merit 2 nights. I will warn you that there are several different places to stay of the Grand Canyon. And when I'm talking about the Grand Canyon, I'm talking about the main national park area, which is the South Rim. So, it's a big canyon, and we're talking the southern part of it. There is a West Rim Grand Canyon, and that is run by the natives, the Indian tribe there. And that is where there's the skywalk, the glass kind of like horseshoe that they built out overlooking the canyon. And they also have, I think, a teepee and some examples of in native life and culture and stuff like that. And that is also where there's more rafting available, like quick little float trips up and down. But it is not the main iconic, deepest, widest part of the Grand Canyon. That is the South Rim. And, if you wanted to do it and you wanted to do the Grand Canyon right, I would tell you to book early and book the El Tovar, which is the original kind of historic national park lodge that's built right there on the rim. So if you want to do, sunrise at the rim, that's the easiest place to do it from. There are a few other lodges right there along the rim, but the El Tovar is the famous historical significant one. Now I would say it's the nicest one, but we're not talking luxury here. This is national park lodging. So it's basic, but that's the sort of grand dame of them all. There are some other lodges inside the park, but set away from the rim, and they kind of are much more rustic, much more basic. Some don't even have air conditioning as far as I can remember, but there are lots of options, and there are tons of ranger-led things to do in the national park area, in that South Rim area. You can, hike. You can hike down to the bottom. If you want to hike down to the bottom, you need to reserve that well in advance, because there's only one kind of campground lodging area down at the bottom of the canyon, and that does book out really, really far in advance, like a year in advance. Um, but I mean, yeah, hikes, views, history, all kinds of great stuff is all around the Grand Canyon. If you aren't booking early enough, because all of the Grand Canyon lodges do book up, not maybe a year advance, but they do book up in advance. So if you're not booking that far in advance, you can drop down to the town that's just like 10 minutes south of the national park entrance, and that town is Tusayan, Tusayan. And there are a bunch of cute little, like regular motels like Holiday Inn Express and things like that. And there are plenty of places to stay and eat. And that's also where a lot of excursions will leave from. Like if you do the helicopter tour, which I highly recommend, doing a flyover over the Grand Canyon, it's really, really impressive and powerful. That leaves from Tucson, trail rides, things like that. Most of those kinds of activities will leave from Tucson. But if you don't want to be that close, or you don't want to leave sort of Route 66 or I-40, there are two options that are about a half an hour south of the lodge or the national park entrance, and that's Williams and Flagstaff. And Flagstaff is like, a small city in Arizona, and so you've got, all the choices in the world there as far as where you want to stay and everything like that. Williams is a much smaller town, also still on that sort of Route 66 famous area. And the good thing about staying in Williams is that if you wanted to do the train, the Grand Canyon Railway, that leaves from Williams. And so you can spend the night in the hotel there, the railway hotel, and then get on the train, take the train up, wander around the Grand Canyon for the day, and then take the train back, have lunch, all that good stuff. And that's a really lovely trip, and it's also very easy. You don't have to deal with like parking and kind of the crowds of the national park and all that good stuff. So now that you've done the Grand Canyon, you have a choice. You can either go south and continue and make it a big Arizona adventure, continue down to Sedona, and then finish in Phoenix and fly out of Phoenix. And that's probably the shorter route, and would be really lovely. Sedona is a beautiful, beautiful area with lots of red rocks, lots of native art and stuff like that. Some beautiful resorts for seclusion and spa and spirituality and that kind of thing. And then Phoenix, Scottsdale is the nicer part of Phoenix, and has lots of beautiful spas and resorts again, and you can hike Camelback Mountain and stuff like that. But it is much, obviously Phoenix is a big city, so that's much more of a city thing. And that's if you really only had a week, that's what I would recommend you to do. But if you had more time, what you would want to do is go around the Grand Canyon north towards Lake Powell. And Page, Page, is the town outside of Lake Powell. And Lake Powell is super beautiful with all the sort of cool rocks. It's a, it's a dammed part of the Colorado River. Is that the river? And it's super beautiful. You can rent a houseboat and stay for a couple days, or you could just stay at one of the motels in Page, or you could go to the very fabulous 5+ star rural resort called Amangiri, and that would be wonderful. While you're staying in Page, there are definitely a couple things that you would consider either for like an afternoon or a day trip. That's Antelope Slot Canyon, which is right near Page, and there's an upper and a lower, and that's that really cool, swirly, very narrow gorge. So for photographers, it's a dream. It's just a really easy walk, but you're in like, a very narrow gorge with all the red rocks, and it's beautiful. And then further out, probably about 2 hours from Page, is Monument Valley, and that's where all those beautiful old Western movies, it's flat with all the big mesas, the big rock formations out in the world, like think John Wayne movies, things like that, John Ford movies. And Monument Valley is managed by the Navajo tribe. And there are a few places to stay out near there, a few, but it is pretty rustic in the middle of nowhere. And again, I know the Navajo have been hit really hard with COVID, so I don't know how they'll be doing next summer. But that is a really cool, you can get a Navajo guide that will drive you through, and they'll explain their culture and their history, and you can even have like a Navajo taco out in the desert with them, and it's a really fabulous experience. And so from Page, again, if you have a lot of time, you can go up to Moab to see Canyonlands and Arches National Park, which is really, really wonderful, but that does take a little bit more time. Or from Page, you can just curve up and go to Bryce Canyon National Park and Zion National Park. Again, I would do those 2 different nights. I had a client recently that squeezed them into one day and they were miserable. You really will not do either park justice unless you do an overnight in each or skip one of them. But Bryce Canyon is a really interesting small little canyon with hoodoos, like these sort of red chimneys everywhere. And then Zion is just kind of stunning, huge granite formations, really great hiking. And Springdale is the town right outside of Zion if you can't get into the National Park Lodge. And for Bryce, you want to stay at Ruby's Inn. Basically, there are three Best Westerns right outside of the entrance of Bryce National Park. If you can't get into Bryce's National Park Lodge, then there are 3 Best Westerns right outside, and those are your best option to stay in Bryce. And then from Zion or Springdale, it's just a quick, I don't know, 3-hour drive or so back down to Vegas. You could stop at Valley of Fire, which is a state park where they have filmed like Star Trek, and it's like a very otherworldly kind of area. But you might be ready to get home. So from there, you can just end up in Vegas and fly home from there. So that is my very quick and dirty overview, ideal itinerary options for doing the Grand Canyon and some of the national parks in the Southwest. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I will talk to you next week. Bye.